Hey everyone, Geophysicist Stefan Burns here. There has been a burst of activity in the Ring of Fire just in the past 24 hours and also with our sun, a big solar explosion. Now most notably is this magnitude 6.6 earthquake which ruptured in northern Taiwan today just a few hours ago as I'm recording this at a depth of 67.5 kilometers right outside Taipei. Taiwan has a lot of people living there. Millions and millions of people live on this tiny island. That was a big earthquake causing a lot of shaking. And well, just 3 days before, on the 24th of December, there was a magnitude 6 earthquake that ruptured at a depth of 10 kilometers. So first you get this earthquake to pop off. You see that this is a very active subduction zone and geologic setting in general. And then 3 days later, you get a 6.6 earthquake to pop off. Either of those earthquakes, if you're just to look at them, you can say, okay, well, that's about a 5% chance that that's a foreshock because that's the standard rule of thumb. Now that we've had two back to back, and this 6.6 is 8 times more energy released than the magnitude 6, I would say this is a little bit more likely now to be a foreshock sequence than it was before with just the magnitude 6, or if there had been just the magnitude 6.6. So I would say probability now going from 5% to maybe about 10%. Now just a few hours before this, just to the south in Indonesia, Mount Merapi also had a volcanic eruption, and in fact it was so strong it generated a pyroclastic flow. So a big burst of activity across Asia here, and we've also just had a 5.1 M-class flare blast off from the sun from a sunspot group that is rotating towards Earth direct. Sunspots right now are over 140. So quite a lot of activity here on Earth and also with the sun. That we'll cover and much more in today's video. And here we have a video showing the shaking from that 6.6 magnitude earthquake that struck Taiwan today, the 27th of December. And if you go to Twitter, X, and type in earthquake in Taiwan today or in the future, you will be able to find quite a few videos. But this shows just how strong this shaking was, everything flying off these shelves. And if we go here, you'll see that most of the earthquake activity over the past month has been concentrated in the Western Pacific. So we have the entire Ring of Fire. It's not just the Western Pacific. It also goes through the west coast of North America down to South America. The largest earthquake ever observed was a magnitude 9.5 here in South America. So we get big earthquakes there. But recently the activity has really been focused here in the Western Pacific with these subduction zones, which is kind of interesting because if you zoom out, you see that we have our mid-ocean ridge here. So plate is being generated, the oceanic crust and new continental plate is being generated here. And then with South America, it's immediately subducting down, whereas it gets a bit more of a run here going across the majority of the Pacific, and then it subducts down with Japan and Philippines and all these places. So it's a little bit more waterlogged, you could say. It's older crust, a little stiffer, that eventually does subduct down here. But you would expect there in general to be a balance across the two, and across geologic time there is. But what we're seeing right now is a skewing of activity towards the Western Pacific versus towards the Eastern Pacific. And this is interesting because if we look at the antipode for Taiwan here, we see that it hits effectively South America. And so what we've been seeing in 2025 is a lot of antipodal activity where we've been having big earthquakes in Kamchatka, and then just slightly off of that antipode in the Drake Passage, we've been having reciprocal earthquakes, and they've been ping-ponging in time. So you get Kamchatka, Drake Passage, Kamchatka, Drake Passage. Well, I'm not saying that we're going to have some sort of antipodal earthquake down here guaranteed, but I think it is a higher likelihood. Now, this isn't going to be exactly opposite side of the globe. If there is, it's going to hit right in that subduction zone. So that's very close to the antipode, close enough to be called an antipodal earthquake, but it's unlikely to strike in the middle of the continent, which is the exact antipode. And that's what we've been seeing with Kamchatka. If I type that in, you will see that are antipodal location. Here is Kamchatka itself, the peninsula. We've been having these big earthquakes here, including the megaquake right off the coast there. You see that the antipode is here just slightly to the east of the Drake Passage in between South America and Antarctica. So the Drake Passage earthquakes have been occurring there, just slightly offset. So we've been having this antipodal action already with earthquake activity. Now we're seeing this skewing of activity to the Western Pacific continue. We've had tons of earthquakes in Japan over the past 2 months, magnitude 7.6 being the largest, but also a 6.7 aftershock, a 6.6 aftershock, 6.8 and 6.4 pre-shocks, 2 zones of activity, and also a new one that has opened up here with lesser magnitude 5+ earthquakes. Now, of course, the magnitude 6 earthquakes in Taiwan, the 6.0 on the 24th of December, now the new 6.6 on the 27th of December. And there has been also a bit of activity in and around Guam in the Philippines. Papua New Guinea had that 6.5 earthquake back on the 22nd of December. And Mount Merapi in Indonesia erupting with a pyroclastic flow. Let's check it out. And just about 6 hours before that magnitude 6.6 earthquake struck Taiwan, we saw a volcanic eruption and pyroclastic flow at Mount Merapi in Indonesia. So here we see that very clearly dead on flowing down the slopes. And look at that. You see all the ash and everything flowing down. Remember, these move really, really quick. So you can't outrun this. Thankfully, it did not go further down. It would have needed to be a much bigger eruption for that to be a very significant pyroclastic flow. But check out this footage from the official geologic agency. This was a big pyroclastic flow. So this volcano is very, very active. Indonesia has a ton of volcanoes because of the geologic conditions there. And we've been seeing a lot of volcanic activity in 2025. Also a lot of seismic activity. This year is one of the biggest years for seismic energy release and high magnitude earthquake activity in general for our entire historic record since we've had good seismograph stations and more. So going back to like 1900 or so. So it's been a very active year. It's also been a very active year with the sun, and we just had a 5.1 M-class flare blast off. Let's check it out. And we can look at the sun using our 131 angstrom view to see that 5.1 M-class flare right at the beginning here. Check it out. Boom, shakalaka. That was a big flare, and you'll see that the sun is slowly rotating like this. So from the eastern limb here, this is solar coordinate system, it's going to take about a week for that sunspot group to rotate towards Earth direct and center. We also have a sunspot group up there, which is active. Notice how it's crackling and popping and bustling with activity. It's usually not a good sign as it relates to there being a big solar flare soon to come. And this is a sunspot group which has been very active now for more than one rotation. It takes about 28 days for the sun to rotate in the equatorial zones, a little bit longer, about 30, 32 days up in the polar regions. So these areas of activity have been on the Earth-facing side before with their last rotation. They were fairly active. We have them now showing new signs of activity with a 5.1 M-class flare in that second strongest category of solar flare, only X-class flares being stronger. And we're at the end of solar maximum, the beginning of the descending phase. So the Earth has been loaded with energy now, more energy than normal from the sun for 2, 3, 4 years, going through the end of the ascending phase, all of solar maximum. And now we're starting to ramp down with sunspot activity and overall solar activity. Those sunspots right now are over 140. Solar flux is over 160. Effectively, Earth has been loaded with a ton of energy. So personally, to me, it doesn't come as a surprise that we've been seeing a lot of seismic activity and a lot of volcanic activity, because the solar system is one larger energetic system, a circuit, you could think of it like that. And this energy from the sun does enter into the Earth geophysical energy system, and it charges the global electric circuit. An interesting thing too with this solar cycle in particular is that we've been seeing a lot of lower frequency energy being emitted from these solar flares. So often you'll get this burst with the X-ray flux, and then you'll also get a solar radio burst. That'll be like in the gigahertz spectrum. But we've been seeing a lot of like 20 to 50 megahertz activity from these solar flares, which is abnormal. That is something that has been noticed though. And that type of energy will pierce more deeply into the Earth because it has a lower frequency. So that is also quite interesting. We can look at our sun in our 211 angstrom view to see the activity that we have as it relates to the solar corona, the outermost atmosphere of the sun, made up of high temperature plasma. We see this large coronal hole here to the south. This is an area where there isn't that much plasma in the corona. So the plasma density is low, the plasma temperature as a result is lower because it's all been vacuumed out to space because the magnetic field here extends deeply into interplanetary space. And in fact, this coronal hole was a monster coronal hole that has a section also connecting up here. You no longer see it, but we've been covering that on the channel and that connected to Earth. And we had a pretty significant high-speed stream impact, and we see this earthquake activity related to high-speed stream impacts and low solar wind density. And well, we've had a flurry of activity over the past few days because we had the 6.6 today, we had the magnitude 6.0 earthquake in Taiwan as well, the 6.5 that hit Papua New Guinea. And before that, there was about 10 days where we didn't have anything going back to the 12th of December. We see a new coronal hole up here. It's not trans-equatorial, but there's still time for perhaps this become a trans-equatorial part for this solar plasma to get vacuumed away. And perhaps these even connect together. It looks like that's a possibility, meaning that this would be a gigantic coronal hole if it did. Because again, it extends all the way now onto the far side of the sun. But this is going to take about a week, 8 days to reach the geoeffective position. We'll see if that hits us with a high-speed stream, but you'll notice these big sunspots rotating in behind. So if this does go geoeffective around the beginning of January, we are going to have these sunspots exactly Earth-facing direct, and that in general charges up the global electric circuit, because whether you get solar flares from these or whether they just kind of stay at quiescent levels of activity, you're getting more extreme ultraviolet and X-ray radiation launching into space from them. Just in general, there's more light output from the sun from active sunspot groups because the magnetic field is all twisted and you just have more processes generating these light photons across the entire spectrum, excluding gamma rays. You need like a super flare basically to generate gamma rays on the sun. It's very rare. So you're going to be having more energy hitting the Earth at that time. We possibly will have a high-speed stream impact. And we also have a historic planetary alignment coming up at the beginning of January. Let's check it out. Here we have our 3D solar system visualization application, which allows us to see the planets and their positions as they are right now. And you'll notice that we have this alignment between Jupiter, the Earth, Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars taking shape in our heavenly abode. And so we see if we go forward here just a little bit, this really clicks in early January, specifically January 7th, January 8th, January 9th is when this looks really, really precise. And you have to go all the way back to 1936 to get an alignment similar to this one. And then before that, it's hundreds and hundreds of years. So this Jupiter, Earth, Mercury, Venus, Mars alignment is quite rare. We get this sort of Earth, Venus, Mars alignment every 2,338 days or so. That's 6.6 years. So that's kind of interesting how that's mirroring the 6.6 magnitude for the Taiwan earthquake. And also interesting is that this 5.1 M-class flare occurred at 0150 universal time, whereas the 6.6 earthquake in Taiwan occurred at 1505 universal time. So some interesting mirroring of the numbers. If you're into numerology, then you can explore into that more. Just wanted to present that to you. But we have this historic planetary alignment coming up, and at the same time, we have Saturn and Neptune conjunct in the sky a once every 35 to 37 year cycle. So the planetary geometry is very intense now going through the middle of January. And in general, we see this connection between solar activity, significant planetary geometry, and also significant earthquake activity here on Earth. So just in general, because of all these factors, I would say there's a much higher likelihood of there being high magnitude earthquake activity, also volcanic activity that's notable, and also more extreme solar activity for the next 3 weeks. None of this means that's guaranteed to occur, but I think it's a much higher likelihood than normal. And we're definitely not in solar minimum where the sun isn't going to do anything. So this is quite significant, and I wanted to bring that to your attention. And a new update for you on interstellar object 3I Atlas, thanks to Gemini North taking some photos of it post-perihelion. That was its closest approach to the sun on October 29th. It reappeared in our skies in early November, and then they took this imagery on the 26th of November, so about a month ago now, but some of our highest resolution imagery of 3I Atlas that we'll have post-perihelion, because it's only getting further and further away now from the Earth. So I'll link this in the video description if you want to read it. Here's the imagery directly. We have our green optical band, our red optical band, also 2 infrared bands here with I and Z. And you see that the coma shows up really nicely in the red optical band. You know, dust reflects more of these reddish wavelengths, whereas you get more of a chemical look at 3I Atlas with the green optical band. But we also see its coma showing up nicely in the infrared bands there. And this is 60 arc seconds across, so 1 arc minute, and the coma is estimated from these images to be about 130 arc seconds across. That calculates out to 185,000 kilometers. So while the nucleus of 3I Atlas has never been directly imaged, and we're not going to because we missed our opportunity to send the Juno probe orbiting around Jupiter to rendezvous with this thing, because this is flying very close to Jupiter in mid-March, you need to get a probe right in there to see whatever this thing is, whether it's a comet, ISO, whatever, right? We missed our opportunity. We're only going to be able to image the coma, the surrounding envelope of gas and dust and also plasma surrounding this thing. It's a complex dusty plasma. And it's very large because you have these jets emanating from this object, pushing this material out way deep into space. And because it's only 1 to 5 kilometers across, it's a very tiny nucleus, has very low gravity. So if there's a high enough velocity on this gas and dust emission, it really goes out there. So a tiny, tiny nucleus, big, big, big coma, complex dusty gas coma, because the gas and the dust, once it's in the space environment, it gets ionized to some degree. So it can be either weakly ionized or strongly ionized. Often the transition is pretty fast between a weakly ionized and a strongly ionized medium because of just how plasma works. It has a lot of discontinuous behaviors to it. So at times, 3I Atlas has been very, very ionized because of all the solar activity that hit it in its close approach to the sun, where it's receiving about 735 watts per square meter. There's tons of solar storms that were launched to it. It had a whole bunch of solar flare. Light photons hit it during its perihelion transit. Keep all that in mind. Now it's cooling off as it moves further and further away from the sun, as it moves further away from the Earth, but it will be approaching Jupiter. So I'll keep you up to date on that. There's been no change in the trajectory of 3I Atlas. If there is something crazy that happens, I will keep you up to date to make sure you subscribe to the channel. But as of right now, it's following along its calculated trajectory pretty much perfectly. It's still unusual in the fact that it has all these jets and its sunward facing tail, the anti-sunward tail, and some of its chemical composition characteristics are unusual, but as of right now, it's looking just like a very unusual natural object and not something for us to be worried about. So a big burst of energy has hit the Earth today, the 27th of December, with that magnitude 6.6 earthquake that struck Taiwan, also the eruption and pyroclastic flow at Mount Merapi, and then we had that 5.1 M-class flare on the sun. So interesting how these things cluster in time. I think we're due for more of this as we move towards that historic planetary alignment early January. Those big sunspots are Earth direct and center. We're in that coronal hole high-speed stream. And well, who knows what else? There's a lot of things happening right now. So if you'd like to stay up to date, then please subscribe to the channel. Again, I've been your host, Stefan Burns. Smash that thumbs up button to help the channel grow. And a channel announcement is that the Boom Shakalaka hoodie is now available on earthevolution.com/store. And we are running a sale till the end of the year, 5% off everything using the code THANKSSTEFAN, all one word. All that information is linked in the video description, but people have been demanding this hoodie basically after I wore it a few times on the show. I wasn't originally planning on releasing it, but we were able to rework it in such a way that it's now available for everyone. So this is absolutely one of my favorite pieces of merchandise that we have made yet. We see the graphic here on the front, the meteors, the comets, the UFOs, the solar explosion, volcanic eruptions. You have the earthquakes and our Boom Shakalaka mascot right there. So this is all available at earthevolution.com/store. Boom Shakalaka hoodie going from small to 3XL. And on the back, it does say Earth Evolution, though it's not too large or anything like that. And there's a lot of other stuff on this store as well. So a whole bunch of holistic wellness tea products and also herbal coffee. This is something that my dad and I do. So we make and mix all these tea blends ourselves, and then various merchandise is available, as well as some other products, my children's book, One Good Turtle, and some artwork from my father here. These are nice canvas prints of some of his natural soil pigment artwork from across his artistic career. So some really excellent stuff here that's good for your mind, your body, your soul, your health, your wellness, and more. I recommend you check it out. Capitalize on this year-end sale. We don't run sales that often because we already offer things at very fair prices. All these tea blends, for example, are completely organic, and so we use super high quality ingredients. So there's no dusting of stuff in there to promote this, but it's the last ingredient. It's all really, really good stuff. And I want to offer this at fair prices, so we do. So we don't have sales that often, so this 5% sale is quite unique and rare. I would definitely recommend you take advantage of that, and the Boom Shakalaka hoodie is our latest merchandise that's available. So again, earthevolution.com/store. Thank you all so much for watching. Wishing each and every single one of you well. I'll be back with a new video once there is a notable update to release, which I'm sure is going to be pretty soon at this rate. So hope to see you then, and I'll see you all very, very soon.